When the birth of 4 children was announced, the church immediately dispatched a priest to the Phoenix family because it is something unheard of in the long history of the empire. The number 4 was regarded as the most ominous number in the empire, leading the church to suspect that one of the children might be of demonic origin. The Duke and Duchess of Phoenix, though polite, declined the church's request for an investigation multiple times. However, due to the church's persistent demands, the family eventually allowed a priest to watch over the quadruplets. For an entire month, the children were bathed in holy water every morning, had a gold cross near them at all times, and their mother was only allowed to see them for 2 hours a day. The quadruplets were born after years of the Duke and Duchess being childless, so the accusations against the children deeply affected the Phoenix household. The Duke's patience was wearing thin. Thankfully, the church's inspection revealed no demonic traits in the children. However, the priest's report mentioned that each of the quadruplets displayed strange habits. The first child never cried, even when doused in cold holy water or when a silver cross was placed on her body. The second child would stare into the void for so long that his eyes become bloodshot, almost as if he had forgotten how to blink. The third child babbled incessantly, as though trying to speak. The priest tried to express his concerns about these odd behaviors, but the Duke and Duchess were thrilled, believing their children to be extraordinary. They eagerly inquired about the youngest child, hoping he would have unique traits as well. The priest, however, shrugged and described the youngest as ordinary, although he refrained from mentioning a peculiar behavior that whenever the priest fed him or changed his diaper, the baby would hold up his middle finger. The priest didn't know what to make of it and decided not to say anything. In truth, the quadruplets seemed to be normal, and as time passed, the rumors about one of them being the devil's child faded. The children were now recognized as the heirs of the Duke Phoenix, with nothing particularly extraordinary about them. However, the youngest child was anything but ordinary because he was a reincarnated spy from Earth with strange powers from his previous life. While the Phoenix family had no idea about his past life, the youngest son was well aware. His name is Lucas, and he remembered everything, including his former identity as Jung Jo-hun, a 29-year-old man from another world. To make matters even more astonishing, his siblings also remembered their past lives, turning the existence of the Phoenix quadruplets into something beyond comprehension. As the years passed, the youngest son Lucas, who was the most ordinary by appearance, knew he had to keep his previous life a secret. Although the life he was reborn into seemed precious compared to his old one, he began to wonder if he could truly survive with such a burden. The Phoenix family, unlike other noble families, does not have a long history, with its first head being Duke Phoenix, a war hero who appointed vassals and knights from commoners after the Great War. While irrelevant in imperial politics, the family holds great power due to the Duke's heroic legacy and their duchy's position as a defense line near the Silverfang people's lands. The family enjoyed freedom and peace, with the youngest child living a carefree childhood alongside ordinary siblings. However, everything changed when the annual ritual of alchemists held to honor the god of hunting and spirits, where knights and nobles came together to hunt, approached. Duke Phoenix, possessing the mysterious power of spirit, hosted this grand event, and he was excited to witness it. This festival would soon become the turning point in their otherwise normal lives. Lucas participated for the first time at age 10. While learning to hunt and preparing for the ritual, memories of his past life fully returned. It was during this festival that he realized the other siblings had also regained their memories. In the midst of the ceremony, a sudden commotion broke out that his older brother William, the firstborn of the quadruplets, had disappeared. The entire festival ground went into chaos as knights, and even their father, a powerful magician, scoured the grounds to search for him. Rumors began to spread that a neighboring group might have kidnapped him. Hours later, to everyone's shock, William returned dragging with him a tiger's skin. He had supposedly gone out hunting on his own and managed to bring back the impossible. At this revelation, the Duke hurried to his son, followed by Lucas. Both are eager to hear the explanation behind this extraordinary feat. In a moment of tension, his father learned from the knights that his older daughter, the second eldest child named Sophia, had suddenly disappeared. Frustrated, he questioned their vigilance, especially after William had caused chaos with his recent mammoth hunt. To everyone's surprise, Sophia soon returned, not only alive but with a massive body bear. It was astonishing that an 8-year-old girl could capture such a beast, especially since it took hours to travel from its habitat. Duke dared not ask how she had done it, fearing her answer, but she boldly declared, "Because I don't want to lose to him." That day was sheer chaos for the Duke family of Phoenix. While Lucas's older siblings were at the center of the commotion, his third sister named Dove casually wandered the hunting grounds, and she brought back dozens of lions, crocodiles and wild snakes, as if they were her loyal pets. An old maid, believing in superstitions, proclaimed that they were all blessed by the sun. Thus, the legend of the quadruplets who received the blessing of the sun was born, and Lucas felt he was merely a bystander to his siblings' achievements. He thought if they had known their true identities, they wouldn't have said such things. What was the sun's blessing worth to those who tried to destroy his previous world? His mornings always began with strawberry milk. The maid, Teresa, would bring him freshly picked strawberry berries from the garden, mix them with sugar and milk and serve him the drink, while he lounged by the window, gazing at the vast sea under the warm sun that helped calm his nerves after a night filled with nightmares. Living in a nursing home on an eastern island of Phoenix territory, he considered it his personal paradise, away from his crazy siblings. After finishing his shake, he headed to the bathroom, where an antique marble bathtub filled with skin-soothing petals awaited him. However, upon testing the bath's water, he could feel its heat radiating before even touching it. With a frown, he called out, "Teresa." "The bath water is too hot." Teresa, his clumsy yet loyal childhood maid, rushed in and after burning her finger on the water, exclaimed, "Oh, that's true." He couldn't help but joke. "Were you trying to boil me like a chicken?" Teresa, with her innocent charm, responded, "Oh no, I still like master." Her naivety was exactly why he kept her around, despite her frequent mistakes. Better to have a clueless maid than a smart one plotting behind his back. After cooling the water and enjoying his bath, he returned to a perfect breakfast of bacon, flat bread, smoothie, and a perfectly brewed tea. As he savored the meal, a knock on the door disrupted his peace. It was the servant, the man who ran the villa. His appearances usually meant bad news, and sure enough, the servant handed over a red letter from the family. Sighing, Lucas tossed it aside without reading, but Teresa offered to read it aloud. Somehow, she managed to piece together, "Lucas Grimspire. Return to the family right now." The message was clear, as his family wanted him back. But after 4 blissful years of avoiding them, he had no intention of returning to the chaos. "I'm still sick," he lied when Teresa asked when he would return. "But you're fine," she replied, confused. He continues his acting, "It's not my body, but it's my heart." Though tempted by a letter from his mother, he knew what awaited him back home, his bloodthirsty siblings. So, despite the family's insistence, he decided, "I will never go back." Regardless of his reluctance, his father decided to visit the nursing villa in person, without any attendance, as if to slump him into a false sense of security. Not that it mattered that his father alone was more than capable of overpowering him. Duke Valengrimspire Phoenix wasn't just any noble. He was one of the Empire's strongest, one of its 4 pillars, and a man who could make even his reincarnated children tremble. Despite his age, with his dark brown hair and youthful appearance, he looked no older than his 30s. As soon as Lucas opened the door and met his father's eyes, he knew lying was pointless. "Are you okay?" the Duke asked, already aware that his son's illness was a fake. Still, the pile of medicinal herbs his father brought along almost made him feel sick for real. Despite their father-son relationship, Duke Valen was first and foremost the Duke of the Empire. The fact that he came to his room personally, rather than summoning him to a meeting room, showed a rare consideration. When his father arrived, he couldn't help but feel a mix of surprise and inevitability. "I don't want to go back home," Lucas said bluntly. His father's once delighted expression crumpled immediately. "Tell me why." He hesitated, and his father filled in the blanks. "Is it because of your siblings?" And with that, the Duke hit the nail on the head. His father likely thought it was an inferiority complex, but it wasn't that simple. How could he explain that all his siblings were reincarnated demons that nearly caused the extinction of the world in his previous life? Yeah, that's a tough one to drop at breakfast. As the silence dragged on, his father approached and held his hand, a gesture of warmth he had often done when he was a child. Using his spirit power, the Duke enveloped his son in a wave of calming energy. "It's been 8 years. Rumors spread that I had abandoned you." Hearing the Duke's speech about duties and honor brought back memories of his former life. His father had risen from commoner to Duke, a man who had survived countless battlefields, yet still valued life over mere noble pride. Noblesse oblige, and the weight of responsibility that came with their status was something his father was now trying to drill into him. But as the speech continued, all he could think about were the real demons, his siblings. He remembered the alchemist ritual from 8 years ago, when he and his siblings first drew the Empire's attention. They were only 8, yet his siblings displayed absurd strength, like hunting a mammoth, feats impossible for mere children. The Valen family had tried to cover it up, but the Empire never forgot. Dubbing the quadruplets blessed children of the sun, his brother had truly stood out, especially after defeating a seasoned swordsmanship instructor during a simple training session. The Silver Wolf Knights, the elite knights of their family, tried to intervene, only to be humiliated by an 8-year-old boy. William, who had once struggled to lift a wooden sword, suddenly wiped the floor with fully armored knights. That day, he realized his brother wasn't just a child, and he was the reincarnation of Shadowreach's ruler, a terrifying warrior from another life. His suspicions from the alchemist ritual were confirmed, especially when his brother, after knocking out all the knights, turned and ran toward him with a sword. What followed was a brutal beating that left him with broken ribs, cracked legs, and a missing tooth. William remembered his past life, just like him. But unlike his brother's demonic strength, he had his own trump card, the third red eye. A power from his past life that could rival even the deadliest threats to Earth. That was the day his survival journey began, escaping his siblings and staying out of the madness of his family. And that's why he didn't want to go home. Just thinking about that day made him shudder, and he absent-mindedly ran his tongue over the empty space between his teeth, a canine that his siblings' ruthlessness had claimed. That missing tooth was a reminder to steer clear of their insanity. His father, with a concerned look, tried to convince him to return home, but he wasn't having it. "Father, even without me, the family name sparkles just fine," he said, gesturing grandly. "I'm like a sore thumb. It's better if I stay quiet rather than be outshined by my siblings' brilliance." His father replied, "Your siblings just sparkled early. You are young, son. You'll shine too." In time, but he had heard this story a million times as how his father had risen from a lowly commoner to a duke. He cut in quickly, sparing himself the monologue. "Father William is already the continent's youngest general at 16, and Sophia is a magical prodigy. Even the stingy magicians in the tower praised her. And let's not even start on Dove, yeah. The rumors about his siblings had reached him too. They were practically legends, but the nightmare really began when he realized they were reincarnated beings, just like him. At least he had his third red eye, a handy survival tool. If it hadn't been for the chaotic mess of his previous life, he might have lived longer. But no. His siblings had also regained their past powers. William knocked out knights while his sisters discreetly flexed their own terrifying abilities. One day Sophia casually claimed the castle garden as her domain. A few days later, people whispered about the horrors coming from that garden. Dogs with 6 eyes, trees trying to eat gardeners, and it was all classic creepy stuff. When their father confronted her, she simply shrugged and said, "It's my magic." Of course, Sophia was revealed to be a powerful wizard. Thinking about it made him shiver. As for Dove, the third child, she wasn't exactly showing off her power. But at 8 years old, she became the most beautiful girl in the continent overnight, rivaling even their mother, the unbreakable flower. Oddly, no one could remember what she looked like before the alchemist ritual. But he knew the truth. Thanks to his third red eye, he had peeked at her true form. He stayed up for days, haunted by nightmares after what he saw. To the world, she was a beauty, but to him, she was a monster, the result of some vile witchcraft. Sure, all his siblings were strange, but Dove, she was the one he dreaded most. He became utterly convinced, through a series of unfortunate events, that his siblings were completely unhinged. "And I'll never get involved with them," he vowed. But instead of running away to a peaceful nursing home, he opted to quietly coexist, figuring that if he just kept his head down and his mouth shut, he would avoid their chaos. After all, compared to his past life, this one was a paradise. Yet his hope for a peaceful life was dashed 6 months after the alchemist ritual. Despite his siblings' growing reputation for being walking disasters, family dinner was still a mandatory event, courtesy of their commoner-born father. Dinner that night was delicious, but something felt off. His siblings, usually loud and boastful, were oddly calm, eating as if they were awaiting their last meal. Sensing the weirdness, he quickly finished and stood to leave. But the triplets' reactions were a collective one. Wow. And it froze him in his tracks. What did he do now? He tried to act casual as he walked to his room, but the sound of 3 sets of footsteps behind him suggested otherwise. As if things couldn't get weirder, once they were in his room, he made the brilliant decision to suggest a game of cards. William responded first, dropping the bomb, "I guess you remembered your past life just like me." In that moment, Lucas realized the horrifying truth that his demon siblings had now stopped pretending. William's face stayed blank as he calmly declared he had been a ruler of Shadowreach in his past life. Oh great, a child spouting a warning worthy of a mafia boss. Then Sophia chimed in with a threatening smile. She wasn't going to let anyone boss her around, especially not their brother. Things quickly escalated into what looked like a bickering match between 8-year-olds, except one had 9 foxtails and the other was conjuring a dragon from thin air. At this point, death felt more inevitable than taxes. Luckily, Dove, the so-called angel, diffused the situation with a simple sentence, "Mother would be sad," just like that. The 2 ticking time bombs cooled down. Apparently, even reincarnated demigods had a soft spot for their mom. From that day on, the truth was out. His brother William had been the tyrannical ruler of Shadowreach, his second sister, Sophia, a 9-tailed fox from the demon world, and the third sibling, Dove. Well, she was from heaven, literally. And who was he? Just a regular guy who happened to be a spy in his previous life. But of course, Lucas couldn't exactly blurt out, "Hey, I'm the dude you guys obliterated in our past lives instead," he mumbled, Lucas, and hoped they wouldn't press further. Miraculously, they didn't. After a long, chaotic conversation, they ended up making a blood oath that no interfering in each other's business, no fighting and retaliation for breaking the rules. As if any of them would follow that. His siblings were nightmares from his past life, as the ruler of Shadowreach had unified ruthless clans and slaughtered Earth's best warriors, and Sophia the Nine-Tailed Fox had single-handedly made nukes useless against demons and the angel. She had sparked a religious war that tore humanity apart. And him? He was just a guy trying to survive, knowing full well that while his siblings were the seeds of destruction, he was the poor sap stuck with them. Lucas didn't hold any grudges, though, and just wanted to live his new life in peace, like a proper duke's youngest son. Would he manage that? Well, given his track record, probably not. What if they discovered that he had the power to interfere with them? Worse, what if they found out he was a spy who had caused them the most damage? Better to lie low, like a dead mouse, he thought. After all, they had made a blood oath not to mess with his peaceful life. At least, not until the end of the world. But of course, things didn't go as planned. His siblings, regaining their powers from past lives, and even started showing off and creating situations that made Lucas rethink his choices. Realizing that the Duchy of Valen was a chaotic death trap, he decided it was time to get out. So on a conveniently cold winter day, Lucas went to a southern island, pretending he needed to recover from an illness. Ironically, thanks to his power, Third Red Eye people mistook him for one of the children of the sun. Even his father believed in his supposed talent. He was, after all, the precious son. So off to the island he went, and his father had no clue that this illness would keep him there for 8 years. Now back to the present, he tried his best to plead with his father, "Please, let me nurture my mysterious talent on this lovely island." But fate had other plans. Suddenly the spirit his father had placed in him kicked in, and ropes sprouted around his body. "If you don't come willingly, I'll drag you," his father said, smugly. "But father," he cried, but it was too late. His dad's smile said it all, that resistance was futile. "You're staying in my grip until your coming-of-age ceremony," his father added. Fast forward to his return to Grimspire Castle, where his peaceful days were over. His older brother William had been looking for Lucas, not for a heart-to-heart, but at the training ground. The guy was practically a giant now, even though they were the same age. His brother looked like a lion, and he felt more like prey. "Pick a weapon," William said, like he was offering him a casual game of catch. The training ground was filled with every kind of weapon imaginable, from swords to scythes to something that looked like it was designed by a mad scientist. Of course, the poor guy wasn't fooled. This wasn't sparring because it was survival. No thanks. I'm good," really, Lucas said, hoping to weasel out of the inevitable. "I'm just skin and bones, brother. Wouldn't it be a waste of your talent to train me?" He tried appealing to his brother's ego, knowing how seriously William took his martial arts. William laughed as a chilling, villainous laugh, especially for a 16-year-old. Oh great, he thought. This is going to be fun. 8 years later, William still hadn't developed a sense of humor. He grinned and said, "Martial arts aren't about intelligence because they don't feel sadness." Of course, William had made up his mind to teach his cowardly little brother martial arts, and there was no talking him out of it. Why Lucas, though? Weren't there more talented people in the Knights? Apparently they were already practicing other things, and teaching someone like him would be a way for William to practice himself. Lucky him. His last-ditch attempt to get out of it failed, as William kicked the ground so hard the earth trembled. "Think of me as your master," he said. With no other choice, Lucas bowed. It was humiliating, but at least he still had his head attached. When asked to pick a weapon, Lucas foolishly chose a wooden stick, and William's reaction told him immediately that was a mistake. But there was no backing out, and the moment he picked it up, he was yanked toward his brother like a magnet. William assured him that using a stick was a good idea, though he wasn't convinced. He had learned to fear William's kindness, as it often led to bruises and broken teeth. Still, Lucas stood up and prepared for a lesson. Thankfully, it started off as instruction, not a beating. William went on about instructions, all the while floating in the air as if it was perfectly normal. Our protagonist was lost in the details, unable to comprehend any of it. Eventually, William caught on to his confusion and decided to teach him the hard way, of course through his fists. The old engrave it into your body method. His legs trembled as he braced himself for what was essentially a live demonstration of pain. After what felt like an eternity of torment, Lucas found himself back in the medical ward, familiar faces like Michelle applying medicine. William, despite being a terror on the training ground, wasn't all bad. After the beatings, he asked his brother a serious question. What had he been preparing for the last 8 years? While their sisters and William were seeking answers about why they were born as quadruplets, what had Lucas been doing? Of course he couldn't admit that he had been hiding. but surprisingly William reassured him, saying he wasn't the enemy. After that, his brother left him in peace, but something lingered. The more he thought about William's words, the more Lucas realized his brother was right. He needed to build strength. The next day, while still recovering, he found himself laughing. If only these third red eyes gave me physical strength like William, he mused. Even though it hurt, there was something about William's warm words that stuck with him. Maybe, just maybe, his brother wasn't such a monster after all. After getting beaten by William, things took a strange turn at night. His bruises flared up, his body swelled like a balloon, and Lucas turned red like a tomato. Try as he might, he couldn't move or shout for help. Was this some twisted shadow reach technique meant to make him explode? The thought crossed his mind as his body started leaking a foul-smelling red and yellow liquid. It was so grotesque that even the rotten tomatoes from his past life would have been jealous. Despite the mess and the terror, the pain didn't come, and perhaps William's mercy at work. Just as he thought he might die peacefully, a subtle light emerged from his swollen abdomen, and much to his surprise, the grotesque swelling subsided. When morning came, Lucas woke up without a scratch. No scars, no pain, just some rancid liquid all over the bed as evidence that last night wasn't a nightmare. Lucas cleaned up quickly, not wanting anyone to think he'd wet the bed at 16. The real surprise hit him later that day. As he ran down the hallway, something felt off because he wasn't tired at all. Not only that, but he felt stronger, like his pants had shrunk overnight. Lucas sprinted up several flights of stairs without breaking a sweat, something that would have left him gasping before. Maybe William's punches had some unexpected benefits after all? At the training ground, he decided to test his new endurance, joining the knights on their 50 km morning run around Grimspire Castle. Normally this would have killed him, but not today. While the knights collapsed in exhaustion, he stood there, barely sweating and wondering, what did William do to his body? Maybe getting beaten up wasn't so bad after all. Today was a special day, time alone with his father, not in the study or reception room, but in the mysterious ghost hall, a place only a select few could enter. His father, the Duke of the Empire, a war hero and famously known as the Silver Pillar, wasn't calling him for small talk. This doesn't feel good, he thought. Ever since his third red eye activated 8 years ago, his father had been paying him extra attention, convinced that he was a genius. Led by a maid who wasn't even allowed to enter, Lucas walked through the hall's eerie hallway. The deeper he went, the more the place transformed from a stately castle to a magical forest, where roots and flowers covered everything. Well, this is definitely an interesting choice of decor, he mused. Eventually he found his father. The Duke, the legend who controlled the spirits and was feared across continents, was hanging from a giant tree like a cicada, with a blissful expression on his face. "What are you doing?" Lucas asked, looking at him like he had grown another head. "Communicating with the spirits." "Give me a moment," his father replied, smiling as if this were the most normal thing in the world. Despite his serious image, his father was definitely a bit of an oddball. Besides being a duke and a war hero, his father was also the Empire's most famous pitiful husband and the only commoner to have ever married a royal princess. When questioned by the nobles about his bold choice, he declared, "I didn't love her because she was a royal princess. I loved her, and she just happened to be a royal princess," quite the romantic. After finally detaching himself from the tree, the Duke summoned chairs from the roots and they sat down to chat. "I heard you're doing well," his father began. "Really?" Lucas thought. "No one told you I got beaten by William," his father just laughed. "Brothers grow up fighting, there was no point arguing with him." Then, his father subtly asked about his communication with the spirits as something only a few, like him, could master. Despite his legendary status, his father believed his son would surpass him, all because of a fluke encounter with the spirits years ago. It happened after his third red eye activated, and he innocently told his father, "I see a lot of strange beasts." That day, his father, the continent's strongest spirit user, collapsed in shock. The sky eye had allowed him to see what no one else could, leaving his legendary father more flustered than the time he saved the Empire. Lucas could see what others couldn't, and even what they wished they didn't. The defense headquarters thought it was a gift, but he called it a dog's eye. It was like looking at a bad Photoshop job and you couldn't choose what to focus on. Sometimes he'd see ghosts, sometimes emotions turned into colors. Mostly it was useless information. And the downside? His brain couldn't handle the overload. Imagine trying to process hundreds of gigabytes of data with a brain that could only handle one. Lucas fainted more often than he'd like to admit. In his past life, he wasn't a warrior, just a spy and always watching, never fighting. His third red eye could reveal powerful techniques, but knowing them didn't help. He died on his last mission, likely surrounded by enemies. Now, in the present, he tried to tell his father that seeing spirits didn't mean he could control them. But his father wasn't having it. The ghost hall began to shake, elements like water and fire appearing from nowhere. Under pressure, his third red eye activated on its own and he could see the spirits causing the chaos. Can you see them? His father asked, with a grin that said he knew the answer. Nope, not a thing, he lied, trying to ignore the spirit brushing against him like a cat, begging for attention. But his father wasn't fooled. Spirits like air, water, earth and fire surrounded them, and the earth spirit looked particularly hungry. Without his father's presence, that thing might have eaten him alive. His father launched into a lecture about spirits before summoning his main spirit, Mac, a massive silver wolf that looked like it had wandered straight out of a legend. Mac was why his father was known as the silver pillar of the empire. The wolf, bigger than a bull, approached him with a menacing sniff, sizing him up like a steak on a plate. His father gave him an encouraging thumbs up, which didn't help his nerves at all. All right, here goes nothing, Lucas thought, trying to make contact with the wolf. But as he extended his hand, Mac growled and lunged, teeth bared. Lucas dodged and fell flat on his face. Mac retreated, but not before giving him a look that said, "Next time, your dinner, haha. Looks like they think I'm snack material, Dad," he joked, limping from his fall. His father simply said, "Mac was afraid of you. Try again." But he wasn't having any of it. "I think I broke my ankle. Can we call it a day?" His father finally relented, sending the spirits away. "Sorry. Maybe it was too early." He then dropped a bombshell, as if it were casual conversation. "I'm making you my successor. The next Duke of the Phoenix family will be Lucas Grimspire Valen." Wait, what? He thought his father was joking. How could he possibly be the next Duke of the mighty Valen family? The Empire's power wasn't even in the Emperor's hands anymore, as it was split between the Church and two great families, the Silver Pillar and the legendary swordsman. His father, Valen Grimspire, was a one-man powerhouse, single-handedly keeping their family at the top. But without him, the Empire would crumble like a rusted shield. "I can't be the shield of the Empire," Lucas protested. His father, with the calm confidence of a man who once conquered armies, replied, "You can do it." It was surreal because his father wanted to retire to a peaceful life with his mother on a southern island, but the youngest son, with no accomplishments, scared of his brutal brother William, was being handed the reins to the family. That's exactly the problem. With a brother as powerful as William, he knew he wouldn't survive a succession battle. But his father had made up his mind. "Each of you has your own talents," he said. "But you have something William doesn't." "Oh yeah? A fear of getting eaten by spirits," Lucas thought. His father wasn't budging. "This discussion is over. You're the next head of the Valen family." At 24, he would have completed his training, taken on the role of Duke, and then if he felt like it, he could hand the reins over to William or run away. "Is that even possible?" Lucas asked, imagining how easy it would be if running a family were like changing characters in an online game. "Anything's possible with power," his father declared. 8 years of training didn't seem so bad. Maybe by then he could find a way out of this mess. And his father did promise he could do whatever he wanted once Lucas became Duke. "I swear on my grace and my soul," his father vowed. But as soon as his son left, the Duke turned to his spirits, who were all trembling, including his mighty silver wolf Mac. He stroked Mac's head to calm him. "It's okay," the Duke reassured his terrified spirit. "He's gone now." The Duke couldn't believe that his spirits, who had once faced demons without fear, were trembling at the mere presence of his youngest son. What unknown power did his boy possess? A spirit is a magical creature existing between the physical and ethereal realms, can control natural forces and offer great power to its user. But they aren't the easiest bunch, intelligent and proud. They demand respect and share their users' emotions, minus fear. They never fear because, well, they don't die. Even Duke Valen, the continent's best spirit user, has his hands full trying to handle their whims. The Duke believed his youngest son, Lucas, had the potential to surpass him, perhaps even commanding the Spirit Lord. If only the kid had some confidence, the Duke mused, but alas. As Duke Valen pondered his past, he recalled becoming the Lord of Quilt's castle, with enemies glaring daggers at him. Suspicious activities from rival dukes meant they were just waiting for the Valens to grow old and weak before seeking vengeance. Knowing his family's future was uncertain, Valen passed his title to Lucas, hoping his son would rise to the occasion. Despite being a commoner raised to Duke by the Emperor, Valen knew that age would eventually weaken him, so he tried to avoid having children. Yet life surprised him with quadruplets. While joyful, he was also terrified. The Duke threw an extravagant festival at their birth, partly to celebrate and partly to show his enemies he was still strong and not to be trifled with. Initially, he feared for their future, but as the kids grew, their talents shone like the sun. His eldest, knocking out knights at age 8, his daughter, a genius wizard, and even his youngest, Lucas, turning out to be a spirit user more skilled than him. The Duke laughed in delight, no longer worried about his enemies. He knew that when the time came for battle, his kids would obliterate their foes and probably half the empire for good measure. Now, all he had to do was take Lucas to meet a compatible spirit, and the family legacy would be unstoppable. As soon as William returned from the city of Bemonia, he summoned Lucas to the training camp. Knowing that William's physical teaching would probably hurt but be effective, he gathered his courage and went. His inner pep talk, "hang in there for a day, and you'll get stronger," didn't offer much comfort. "Now that you've got the basics, I'll teach you martial arts," William announced. It sounded like the usual speech before a good thrashing, but this time something was different. No shouting, no condescending tone. William even showed him how to hold a weapon seriously. He brought out 2 long sticks and began demonstrating how to use them. It wasn't as bad as expected and no beating for now. So Lucas tried to copy the moves. When William demonstrated how to swing the stick with force, it seemed easy enough until he smashed the stone floor like it was pudding. He tried the same but could only tap the floor like an old man with a cane. William, unimpressed, shouted, "Why does it look like you're using a cane? Good question." Despite several attempts, while William pulverized the ground, Lucas barely scratched it. After some more failed moves, William broke his stick and looked at him with pity, saying, "I must be a terrible teacher." Then, just as expected, the real training began. William beat him up, and as usual, Lucas hoped to wake up stronger the next day. But instead of waking up like a powerful warrior, his entire body was still throbbing with pain, and definitely not the transformation he had in mind. Lying in bed, cursing his fate, Lucas heard the door squeak open. To his horror, his sister Dove walked in, a terrifying figure from his past. But he knew her as something far more sinister. She sat down beside him, offering to heal his wounds. He was suspicious of her sudden kindness, but there was no denying her abilities. Despite his internal dread, Lucas let her heal him, only to realize how terrifying she really was. As her light flowed through him, healing his bruises, he thought, "She's scarier than William." While she healed his physical wounds, the emotional ones of being in her presence resurfaced. Dove, known as the most beautiful woman in the Empire, was nothing but a walking nightmare to him. He saw her as a rotting zombie with exposed bones making his skin crawl. Yet despite the disgust, he had to endure her presence. She asked why he had been avoiding them for 8 years, hinting at his origin from Earth. The conversation was enough to make him want to throw up. In the end, Lucas concluded that facing William's beatings was far better than dealing with his terrifying sister. He felt like a helpless mouse staring down a snake. Thanks to Dove's weird powers, his wounds were healing, but his fear was escalating. Gathering his courage, he tried to lock eyes with the skeletal figure but quickly turned away. There was no time to think or come up with excuses now, and the danger was real. Dove, in her past life, had been a major cause of human extinction. While the angels hadn't destroyed cities or killed humans outright, their presence spread madness like a disease, erasing religion, nations, and even families. People who followed the angels became instruments of destruction. Dove knew Lucas was an earthling, and that fact filled him with dread. Only one option remained, is to beg for mercy. Pride. Who needs that when facing someone who could crush you like a bug? "Please spare me," he said, genuinely hoping for some kindness. She just laughed. But then, Dove reassured him, saying she wasn't interested in his past life. Lucas hoped it was because he was her youngest brother. Maybe it didn't matter that he was from Earth. She smiled, but it was one of those smiles that screamed, "You're so in my hands." After healing him completely, Lucas gave her a weak thanks, sister, and tucked himself under the blanket, hoping she'd leave. But nope, Dove decided to sit down and make herself comfortable instead. Wasn't she supposed to be busy? Yes, apparently she had to go to the church. Perfect. Yet she stayed. And then, just when he thought she'd finally leave, she dropped a bombshell. "This place is hell." Oh, wonderful. Just what he needed to hear before bed. Curiosity getting the better of him, Lucas asked her about how they had died. But Dove claimed she didn't remember. Whether she was lying or not, the conversation ended, and she left him with a welcome back gift and his fully healed body. He thanked her again and breathed a sigh of relief. Still, something nagged at him. When had she discovered his past life on Earth? And more importantly, what was this gift? As he lay there, the sensation of healing lingered, almost angelic. But then, his stomach began to swell, growing like a balloon. Oh great, Dove had definitely given him a gift, and like always, it came with a twist. Dove Grimspire Phoenix truly was a wicked woman. Damn, Lucas muttered, feeling his body swell up like a balloon. But strangely, he wasn't too alarmed. If Dove really wanted him dead, he figured he'd be a cold corpse by now. Besides, after what happened to his older brother William, this was just another day in the bizarre Grimspire household. The swelling eventually subsided, but now he looked like a tomato. Demons really had terrible taste. After all this chaos, his servant, Teresa, came in to clean the room. She took one look at him and immediately started wailing. "Master, you've become ugly again," Lucas sighed. "Is that all you've got to say?" Teresa sobbed harder. offering to make pumpkin tea and warning him to avoid spicy food, thinking his swelling was caused by a bad meal. He couldn't help but feel irritated. Teresa was the kind of dumb that was hard to hate but easy to get annoyed with. Meanwhile, out in the garden, Dove was casually playing with a caterpillar, placing it safely back on a tree branch. Of course, in true Dove fashion, the poor thing burst open, transforming into a glowing white butterfly. Her idea of fun was a mix of beauty and horror. Back to him. After surviving the swelling episode, Lucas headed out for training. Teresa gasped when she heard he was off to William's brutal training sessions. "Oh, my master has changed," he rolled his eyes. "It's just morning training. I've always been active, all right." But deep down, Lucas knew this was no ordinary training. William was infamous for his tough methods, even scaring the strongest knights. Still, he needed to get stronger. If he was going to survive in this crazy world, and maybe, just maybe, beat his siblings one day, he had to endure it. William, with his usual silent and slightly creepy smile, threw him an iron rod instead of a wooden stick this time. Surprisingly, it felt lighter than before. "Teach me, master," he said, ready for another round of punishment. And as expected, William didn't disappoint and violence was served in full. But this time it didn't hurt as much. Maybe that gift from Dove was doing something useful after all. He flattered William by calling him master, knowing it stroked his ego. Day after day, the beatings continued, but he got up every time. His body was getting stronger. The pain wasn't as intense, and little by little, he was learning the art of martial combat. Sure, he still had 8 years of survival ahead of him, but at this rate, he was starting to think he just might make it. Plus, maybe there was a silver lining in becoming stronger, and even if it meant getting knocked around like a human punching bag for a while. Grimspire Castle was unusually peaceful. William had taken the Silver Wolf Knights for field training, and his rather fierce second sister, Dove, had gone off to meet the Pope. The sunny day felt as if two troublemakers had vanished, leaving unexpected tranquility behind. Seizing the opportunity, Lucas decided to indulge in the luxuries of noble life, something he couldn't enjoy during his past life in Korea, where tasteless military porridge was his norm. The Grimspire territory, rich in resources, provided excellent seafood from the coastal city of Romanica. He ordered a lavish meal, wishing he had some soju to go with it, and ate alone in a dining room that was free of distractions. As he enjoyed his meal of sori sashimi, lamb stew, and pickled cabbage, the highlight of steamed crabs with butter arrived. Just as he was about to take a bite of his perfectly prepared crab and rice mix, someone swooped in and stole his spoon. To his disbelief, it was none other than Sophia, his formidable 16-year-old sister, who had appeared out of nowhere. She quickly made herself at home, snatching his food as if she hadn't eaten in years. Despite his initial frustration, Lucas couldn't bring himself to get angry with her. Sophia, his big and intimidating sibling, had returned from the magic tower, where she was rapidly climbing the ranks as a magician. She casually mentioned how boring the tower was, explaining why she had left. Bewildered by her sudden appearance, he wondered what on earth his siblings were up to this time. The magical tower held as much power as a country, and Sophia, at such a young age, had risen quickly in its ranks. In a few years, she might even rival their father in strength. Despite the tower's prestige, Sophia found it boring and had unexpectedly returned to Grimspire Castle, much to her brother's surprise. While helping herself to his crab and rice, Sophia chattered non-stop, throwing out wild ideas like compiling a book of his cooking knowledge to revolutionize noble cuisine. She rambled on about everything, from the world's short culinary history to its chaotic mix of humans, Ain people, and demons. Her chatter, though overwhelming, was oddly cheerful, and despite her intimidating presence, nobody in the Phoenix family hated her. Lucas mused that if he hadn't known about her destructive past, they might have been close. After all, Sophia once earned the title of the woman who beat the world's greatest creation, nuclear missiles. Meanwhile, he only half listened as she rattled off questions about magic, which confused him even more, since he wasn't a magician. Out of the silver, she brought up Polestar, a fictional world from a Korean cartoon. He nervously played along, weaving a ridiculous story about Dooley, a supposedly great wizard with a yellow-haired, red-nosed companion. To his surprise, Sophia listened intently, asking serious questions about body-strengthening magic and time-traveling tools. What had started as playful teasing had quickly escalated, and Lucas was now stuck in a conversation too deep for comfort. Suddenly, Sophia grabbed his arm with terrifying strength, and with a mischievous grin, dragged him off to the garden, eager to test the magic she was convinced he had. Things were not looking good for him. In Grimspire Castle, there are two no-go zones, the Phoenix family's archery range, and a creepy garden behind the castle that looks like it's straight out of a horror movie. The garden used to be just that, a garden, until Sophia Grimspire Phoenix, the Duke's second daughter and a top-notch wizard, turned it into a haunted forest where people's minds get scrambled if they wander in. To keep the curious maids safe, the entrance is plastered with warning signs, though some clueless guests still occasionally find themselves wandering in, only to regret it later. One fine day, Lucas followed his sister, Sophia, into this eerie forest. It was all sunshine and rainbows outside, but the moment he stepped into the forest, it felt like someone hit the spooky button. The air was thick, dark and wet, and there was laughter, not the friendly kind but think ghost in a horror flick kind. Clutching onto Sophia's robe like a scared little brother in a haunted house, Lucas tried to keep his cool, but the creepy sounds made his imagination run wild. Rumors of ghosts, beasts and goblins filled his mind. Sophia teased him, telling him to open his eyes when they reached her cabin, which was straight out of Witch Weekly. It was cluttered with old books, odd trinkets and a musty smell, perfect for a witch's hideout. She cheekily told him that Lucas could use magic there, knowing full well he was more likely to conjure a panic attack than a spell. In the midst of his nervous breakdown, he accidentally spilled some magic beans. His special ability, seeing things no one else could, kicked in and Lucas started blurting out what he saw: shattered glass, torn paper and a cat in a box. No clue what it all meant, but it felt like someone had shoved a fork in his brain. Sophia just laughed it off and sent him back through the forest, but not before he begged her to see him off because there was no way he was walking back alone. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, chaos ensued as a cat, chasing a butterfly, knocked over flasks and tore papers, eventually trapping itself in a chest. Sophia, watching it unfold, couldn't help but laugh when the mess lined up exactly with what her brother had. If Lucas ever ended up with serious injuries, the usual routine kicked in and Dove would swing by, sprinkle her mysterious power, and like magic, he'd puff up like a balloon again. Over time, his body became used. Well, let's just say less than normal, sure. His strength rivaled knights with auras, but it wasn't because of any sweat and hard work on his part. Nope, it was courtesy of his siblings' twisted experiments. At this point, Lucas was practically their lab rat, a walking experiment. In another life, he might have been a B-rank hunter, but here, his siblings were on a whole different level, gods in the making, even surpassing their father. 8 years ago, the trio of genius siblings had laid out their grand purpose. They wanted to find out why the heck they were born as quadruplets. Lucas suspected divine punishment, but hey, he got lumped in with them anyway. While his siblings were obsessed with solving this celestial mystery, he had no intention of joining their quest. Nope, he was content with the lavish life of the Duke's youngest son, letting the others handle the heavy lifting. His plan? Survive 4 more years and hope for the best. One night, while enjoying a snack on his bed, the door creaked open. Instinctively, Lucas dropped his biscuits and tea, pulled the classic move and dived under the blanket, pretending to be asleep. Sophia had been making frequent nighttime visits, probably eager to tinker with his magic. But when Dove joined her and even William shut the door behind them, his nerves spiked. This wasn't a pajama party, despite them being only 16-year-old kids. They showed up like they were about to conquer the world. William donned her knight's armor, Sophia wore her mage robes, and Dove sported her priest's garb, all from the Empire's official religion. His first thought? World domination. Here we go. But then came the twist. Sophia casually asked if he was planning on going in his pajamas. Confused, Lucas finally got up, scratching his head. Wait, am I going too? Where the heck are you all going? Dove dropped the bombshell. To the abyss, her words were more terrifying than any nightmare he'd ever had. The gorge is a bottomless pit, often called the Hell in the Empire, rooted in the celestial realm religion's creation myth. According to legend, the world started as a void where demons constantly feasted on each other in a never-ending cycle of violence. Finding this rather unappetizing, the god of celestial realm decided to intervene, and he raised land, sowed seeds, and even shed a few tears, which, in a rather poetic twist, became the sea. However, the gorge remained a place even God couldn't patch up, leading to its dark, mysterious nature. These bottomless pits showed up all over the world, transcending borders and cultures, universally feared as gateways to a demon-filled underworld. As much as people wanted to avoid them, there were always rumors of hidden treasures within, though. Naturally, demons were said to trick treasure hunters into becoming dinner. The royal family of the Empire even attempted to investigate the gorge before the demonic war, but things quickly escalated into a full-on demon versus human showdown, featuring beings from distant lands and the Ain people. In short, the gorge remains a spooky no-go zone, even for entire nations. He wasn't going, but of course, those guys were dead set on it. A place full of demons? No thanks. Lucas was resolute and his life was on the line here. But then William had to bring up the oath, eyes gleaming like a lion ready to pounce. Remember the oath? Want me to show you what happens if you break it? Not exactly a comforting thought. To make matters worse, his sisters weren't helping. The second one giggled, and the third was rushing him to get dressed. Fantastic. Going to the abyss, where demons hang out, with a bunch of demons. Maybe Lucas could stay optimistic? Even if there were demons down there, it'd be 3 against 1. His wardrobe wasn't exactly heroic with just a leather-upgraded shirt. Even full armor probably wouldn't help much. Lucas made a last-ditch effort. I'll report to Mom naturally. That fell flat, and before he knew it, Sophia had opened a door, revealing a whole new world beyond. 1 second, Lucas was on his bed, and the next, he was standing barefoot on a beautiful white beach. The soft sand tickled his toes and turtles were laying eggs. Not quite the Grimspire territory he knew. And it was daytime, but despite it being night back home. Oh, and he'd forgotten his shoes. Classic. Sophia, can you teleport? He asked, marveling at how easily she'd transported everyone. But nope, this wasn't teleportation. Sophia proudly corrected him, spatial regression, right, because that made it less weird. While Lucas was busy having an existential crisis, his siblings were buzzing with excitement, itching for their first encounter with the Demon Lord. William had already drawn his sword, the others were showing off their magical abilities, and suddenly they were all flying. Yes, flying. Through the air like it was nothing. Meanwhile, Lucas was hiding behind a turtle shell, hoping the demons would just leave him alone. But no such luck. Before he could fully retreat, a silver light engulfed him, and suddenly he was floating. Clutching the turtle shell wasn't going to save him this time. He soared through the sky, helplessly greeting passing seagulls, realizing that this world was nothing like Earth. And then they arrived. The entrance to the gorge looked like a football field-sized, deep golden sea cave. Oh good, he thought. A massive, ominous silver hole in the middle of nowhere. Just what they needed. William didn't waste time. He whipped out his sword and casually muttered Benda, and with a simple swing, shattered the magical barrier blocking their way. The sea itself exploded upward, like nature's version of a giant flush, revealing the gorge a gaping, monster-like mouth waiting to swallow them whole. While his siblings leapt into the depths without hesitation, Lucas was more cautious. Wait, give me some time to prepare myself, he muttered, though no one was listening. With no other choice, he closed his eyes and descended, deeper and deeper, into the gorge he'd desperately hoped to avoid. He slowly opened his eyes, and his heart nearly stopped. The gorge was dark, too dark. Ironically, that made it easier for him to spot the monsters with their cat-like eyes. His third red eye ability activated on its own, revealing the depths of the gorge crawling with hundreds of monstrous creatures. So much for rumors claiming there was only one demon down there, and there were hundreds. Panic set in as Lucas cursed, hoping his siblings could protect him. They were his only hope now. Dove, his sister, with her eerie powers, seemed almost calming compared to the horrors of the abyss. But her chilling presence made him shiver more than reassured him. Meanwhile, his siblings were fearless, as usual. Lucas, on the other hand, was a shaking mess, staring at the monsters rising from the deep. Could his siblings really protect him? He wasn't sure. Would they even try? As he trembled, he shouted in desperation, "They're getting closer," but instead of panicking, Dove whispered calmly, "I told you, didn't I? This place is hell." To make things worse, a monster with 6 heads and spider limbs appeared, and definitely not your average day in the park. His past life experiences flashed before his eyes, but these creatures were bioweapons designed purely for destruction. Just as Lucas was about to pass out from fear, Sophia, his second sister, nonchalantly stepped up. With a playful flick of her hands, she summoned lightning so powerful it instantly incinerated hundreds of monsters. Annoying, isn't it? She smirked, leaving him blinking in disbelief. Well, the crisis averted at least for now. But the adventure wasn't over yet. He reached to the bottom of the abyss, where his third red eye showed him a vast underground world with temples that looked eerily like something from ancient Rome. The resemblance to Earth's architecture left him scratching his head. Who the hell built this? Lucas thought aloud. Dove, always with her cryptic answers, declared the gorge wasn't made. Hell existed long before. Then came the history lesson from Sophia, as some great demon named Daimonian had been sealed down there 800 years ago after almost destroying an entire kingdom. Typical family problems, right? As Sophia casually explained, Lucas felt the need to remind himself that unsealing this demon wasn't the best idea they'd ever had. When the moment came to face the demon himself, things escalated quickly. The beast? A giant mutant grasshopper. The sight alone nearly made him throw up. This was Daimonian, a horrifying monstrosity that no one in their right mind would call cute, except maybe his overly confident siblings. William and Sophia bickered over who would get to kill it. They even resorted to rock, paper, scissors to settle the matter. He watched in disbelief as the two kept tying in every round. Are they really playing a kid's game to decide who kills a kingdom-destroying demon? Lucas thought. The absurdity of it all was interrupted when the ground shook beneath them, signaling the start of their showdown. He heard a sound like a helicopter propeller and looked down, only to scream, "It's coming." To his horror, the noise was from the flapping wings of a gigantic grasshopper, and a grasshopper that believed it could fly. Despite crawling on the ground most of the time, this monstrosity, the size of a cargo ship, was airborne. With a grotesque crimson exoskeleton and too many legs to count, it wasn't just terrifying, it was a creature that could ruin civilizations. In fact, 800 years ago, the empire almost crumbled because of it. As the ground trembled, rocks began falling and the ceiling started collapsing. In the middle of the chaos, his siblings, Sophia and William, were still playing rock, paper, scissors. He grabbed Sophia's tail for comfort, much to her displeasure. Now William won the stupid game and swung his sword, slicing through everything, including the massive grasshopper and the demon daimonian. The problem? The ceiling came down too, courtesy of William's overzealous swordplay. In the ensuing chaos, Sophia kicked Lucas away, sending him plummeting further into the abyss. As he fell, all he could do was shout for help. But of course his siblings pretended not to hear him. When Lucas woke up, he found himself lying in darkness. Luckily, breathing was fine, and he wasn't buried under debris, though his body was battered. Given all the insane training William put him through, it could have been worse. After some resourceful foot wrapping and a lot of walking through maze-like paths, he finally found something at the end of the road. A swirling red smoke. Unfortunately, the red smoke wasn't just unpleasant. It was an evil spirit. Before he knew it, the smoke was all over him, leaving him with a bad aftertaste, like drinking too much iced Americano. When his sister showed up later, Lucas asked her why she abandoned him. She apologized, but the damage was done. Finally, they all came back from their life-threatening adventure, and back in his room, everything seemed normal until Lucas realized that the evil spirit had stayed with him. From that day on, his eyes itched constantly. And every time he took off his eye mask at night, the same red smoke was floating around his head, as if it had no intention of leaving. Lucas screamed, but the guards couldn't see it. It was official that the ghost had attached itself to him, and he was stuck with it. Even the Phoenix family's worst reputation wouldn't save him from this creepy nightmare. As the sun rose and the red smoke dispersed, he had been awake all night. Summoning Teresa, she handed over the odd ingredients he'd requested without a blink: goat's leg, pig blood, and a bronze bell. "Well done," he muttered, setting the items on the table. Memories from a past life, where shamans had helped him with ghosts, floated back. He wasn't sure this would work, but in the absence of sleep, anything seemed plausible. So, why not perform a ritual? After sending Teresa away, he started the ritual. He placed the goat's leg centered, pig blood sprinkled and bell jingling. The dance, well, more of a shaky imitation of one that felt more like a clown act than a shamanic ritual. But then, a scream. Teresa barged in, thinking she was summoned, only to trip and gasp, "Devil worship." No, it's just my birthday dance practice," Lucas improvised, straight-faced. "Why the goat's leg?" "To snack on, mid-dance," he said with a smirk. Innocent Teresa offered to cook it. Later that night, the ghostly red smoke returned. Unlike any other spirit, this one seemed content to float about without causing harm, except for tickling his eyes like some playful but extremely annoying shadow. No threats, no attacks, just tickling. For crying out loud, Lucas snapped, kicking uselessly at the smoke. Even the ghost had no respect for personal space, let alone sleep. Despite his best efforts, the spirit clung to him. And after consulting with his terrifying sister Dove, who is scarier than any ghost, no doubt Lucas got the brilliant advice to play dead as a way to solve his spectral issue. But alas, the ghost preferred to hang around him, playing favorites like a clingy pet. One night the spirit vanished again upon seeing Dove. Clearly the ghost feared her more than him. Later, his other sister, Sophia, dropped by with a mysterious blue gem from the gorge. Apparently it had absorbed the spirit, turning it into something much more intriguing. So while Lucas dealt with a moody gem and a spirit-sucking mystery, he realized that maybe his ghost problem wasn't over after all. Time to call Ghostbusters, perhaps.